On a quiet spring afternoon in 1992, a young woman working alone in an Indianapolis shoe store was found murdered in the back room, leaving investigators with a chillingly clean crime scene and no immediate suspects. This isolated tragedy was actually the opening strike of a highly organized predator. In 1992, law enforcement operated in strict local silos, relying on paper files, physical bulletin boards, and landline telephones to track criminal activity within their own city limits. The technological landscape of 1992 created massive blind spots for investigators. There were no ubiquitous security cameras capturing license plates, no cell phone towers to track movement, and no instant national databases to flag matching crime scenes. If a criminal crossed a state line, they effectively crossed into a completely different investigative universe. This fragmented system meant a highly mobile offender could commit a crime and vanish long before detectives finished processing the scene. Because of this setup, the investigative process in 1992 was painstakingly slow and manual. Detectives had to mail physical copies of fingerprints and crime scene photographs to neighboring states, hoping a desk sergeant might notice a similarity. When a second, nearly identical murder occurred hundreds of miles away in Wichita, Kansas, just days later, the local police initially treated it as an independent, local robbery gone wrong. To bridge this gap, detectives had to rely on regional task force meetings, physically driving to central locations to compare notes and evidence on whiteboards. The procedural reality of the early 90s meant connecting the dots required an investigator to actively suspect a wider pattern and manually call other departments. Until those calls were made, the pieces of the puzzle remained scattered across the Midwest. The direct consequence of this disconnected system was the exploitation of the Interstate 70 highway. This massive ribbon of asphalt stretches across the country, providing a high-speed route through the heart of the Midwest. The killer used this highway not just as a road, but as a primary tool for evasion. By jumping onto the interstate immediately after an attack, the perpetrator could put 60 miles between himself and the crime scene in a single hour. The I-70 corridor quickly transformed from a vital economic artery into a hunting ground. The speed of the killer's travel easily outpaced the speed of information sharing between the towns connected by the interstate. Before police could fully establish a suspect profile, the perpetrator was already crossing into Missouri or Kansas, ready to strike again in a completely new jurisdiction. A heavy blanket of fear settled over the communities situated along the I-70 corridor. Residents who had always viewed the highway as a lifeline of commerce now saw it as a conduit for an invisible threat. The realization that a predator could exit the highway, destroy a life, and vanish back into the stream of anonymous traffic left towns feeling entirely exposed. For the detectives working the cases along the interstate, the emotional toll was devastating. Every time a teletype machine printed a new report of a murdered shop worker in a neighboring state, a profound sense of dread filled the precinct. Investigators knew they were chasing a ghost who was always one step ahead, using the very infrastructure that connected their cities to tear them apart. While the highway provided the escape route, the killer's actual destinations were highly specific. His strategy focuses entirely on small retail businesses. He did not target gas stations, truck stops, or fast food restaurants, which were the typical sites of highway-adjacent crimes. Instead, he sought out quiet, unassuming storefronts located in strip malls just a few blocks off the main interstate exits. These retail locations offered a precise combination of visibility and vulnerability. A driver could spot the store from the road, quickly pull into the parking lot, and observe the activity inside through large glass windows. The focus on these specific types of shops indicated a calculated logistical strategy, allowing the perpetrator to assess the risk and execute his plan efficiently. The environment of these targeted retail shops was remarkably consistent across different states. They were often specialty stores like shoe shops, bridal boutiques, and small gift stores, characterized by large, unobstructed front windows and brightly lit display floors. However, this open design also meant that anyone sitting in a parked car outside could easily count the number of people inside the store at any given moment. Inside, these retail spaces featured quiet midday lulls where an hour or more might pass without a single customer walking through the door. The layout usually included a front counter with a cash register and a secluded back room used for inventory storage. The only sound during these slow hours was often the simple chime of a bell attached to the front door. The economic model of these small stores relied on a very specific system for their employees. To keep overhead costs low, corporate management typically scheduled only minimal staffing during the slower afternoon hours. It was standard practice for these specialty shops to be operated by a single person for long stretches of the day. These employees were almost entirely young women, placed in a system that prioritized lean business operations over physical security. They were responsible for managing the sales floor, handling the cash register, and organizing the back room, all completely alone. This staffing model inadvertently created isolated, defenseless targets waiting quietly just minutes from a major highway. The killer's interaction with these employees followed a rigid, terrifying procedural script. He would enter the store during the quietest part of the afternoon, posing as a normal customer browsing the merchandise. He waited patiently until he was absolutely certain the young woman was the only employee present and that no other shoppers were in the aisles. Once the store was empty, the procedural detail of the crime escalated rapidly. The perpetrator brandished a weapon, forcing the isolated employee away from the highly visible front windows and into the concealed back room. There, out of sight from the parking lot, he executed the murder, took a small amount of cash to simulate a robbery, and quietly walked out. As the physical evidence from these isolated back rooms was finally shared across state lines, the terrifying truth crystallized for law enforcement. The forensic connections, specifically the identical methods of controlling the victims and the matching evidence left at the scenes, proved these were not random robberies. The Midwest was actively being hunted by a single, highly organized serial killer. The undeniable presence of this serial predator forced a massive shift in how these cases were handled. Local police departments could no longer operate in isolation. They had to form an unprecedented multi-state task force. The effort to build a comprehensive forensic profile of the man known as the I-70 Strangler demanded a new level of cooperation, as investigators desperately tried to anticipate his next move. For the detectives sitting in windowless briefing rooms across the Midwest, the reality of this profile brought a heavy, suffocating dread. They were hunting a phantom who moved effortlessly along the interstate, leaving grieving families and terrified communities in his wake. Every unsolved murder file on their desks represented a young woman who had simply gone to work, completely unaware that a highly organized predator was watching. The psychological toll on retail workers along the corridor was immediate and profound. Small business employees, especially young women working alone, found themselves constantly watching the front door, jumping at the sound of the entry bell. The mundane act of opening a store for the day had suddenly transformed into a terrifying gamble with a faceless serial killer. Moving from the widespread fear to the specific traits of the suspect, investigators began to assemble a clear picture of the man they were chasing. The task force synthesized witness accounts from the few people who had seen someone suspicious near the crime scenes. This composite sketch and behavioral analysis narrowed their focus to a very specific type of offender. The resulting profile pointed to a white male in his 20s or 30s, with reddish blonde hair and a remarkably unremarkable appearance. He was described as blending perfectly into the background of a strip mall or a highway rest stop. This ordinary exterior was his greatest weapon, allowing him to travel the interstate undetected and approach his targets without raising immediate alarm. The highway system itself became the primary environment for this investigation. The I-70 corridor is a massive ribbon of asphalt, cutting through flat plains and connecting countless small towns and bustling retail centers. It is a landscape defined by constant motion, where thousands of anonymous vehicles pass through every single hour, leaving no trace of their journey. Along this vast stretch of road, the killer utilized the endless chain of gas stations, motels, and strip malls as his personal hunting ground. These locations offered quick access to the interstate and immediate escape routes. The environment provided perfect cover for a transient killer, transforming the very infrastructure designed to connect communities into a weapon of isolation and escape. The sheer logistical nightmare of tracking this killer permanently changed how law enforcement agencies communicate. Before this investigation, police departments rarely shared daily crime data across state borders. The failure to catch the I-70 Strangler highlighted a massive flaw in the system, directly accelerating the adoption of national, computerized databases for tracking violent crimes. Today, modern violent criminal apprehension programs automatically cross-reference ballistics and suspect profiles from different states. If a weapon is fired in a small shop in Indiana, detectives in Missouri will know about it within hours. This interconnected digital system stands as a direct, lasting consequence of the deadly blind spots exploited by the highway killer in 1992. Despite these massive advancements in police technology, the physical case files remain open, carefully preserved in evidence rooms across the Midwest. Cold case detectives periodically pull the original ballistic reports and witness sketches, running the old evidence against new DNA technologies. They meticulously review the timeline, hoping a modern scientific breakthrough will finally identify the man who vanished onto the highway. For the families of the victims, this ongoing procedural effort offers a fragile thread of hope. They attend annual vigils and maintain regular contact with the task force investigators, refusing to let the memories of their loved ones fade into cold case archives. The enduring human cost of these unsolved murders drives a quiet, relentless push for answers that spans over 3 decades. The composite sketch of the suspect still hangs on bulletin boards in police stations along the interstate. It is a fading, yellowed drawing of an ordinary face staring out over the desks of detectives who continue to search for him. That silent image remains a chilling reminder of a ghost who drove into the Midwest, shattered countless lives, and simply faded away into the endless traffic of I-70. Subscribe for a new story every week.